Hello everyone, welcome to the Vishwashanti Darshan channel. The programming of the channel focuses on science, spirituality and peace. The channel is the brainchild of the Apostle of World Peace, Vishwadharmi Professor Dr Vishwanath Karad. I had been presenting to you the program Gyan Vigyan Dhara, wherein I shared my thoughts related to science and spirituality. Going a step further, we are lucky to have Dr Deepak Ranade. He's a consulting neurosurgeon. He has been contributing to the regular columns of the Times of India, The Speaking Tree. During my chat with him at the studios in VISHWARAJ BAUGH Loni, where he had come to see the world's largest peace dome, I posed 10 conversation points to him on his understanding of the domain of consciousness, which he says he is still understanding. So let's begin the tete-a-tete.
Hi, welcome to Vishwashanti Darshan channel. Today I have invited a very special guest, Dr Deepak Ranade. He's a neurosurgeon. He has come all the way to VISHWARAJ BAUGH to meet you, to meet us. Dr Deepak Ranade has a great interest in reading about consciousness. Welcome Dr Ranade.
I will be putting forth before you 10 such points of conversation. So are we ready, Dr. Ranade?
Yeah, we are ready. We are ready to go.
The importance of distancing oneself. This is the byline, I would say. Now, it is seen in life that when you are watching a painting, when you are seeing a life-size painting especially, from a distance it looks good, very perfect. But as you go closer, you find a lot of imperfect things in it. And much proximity or much closer part of it then say that, well, this is not the same painting which I was looking from afar. Now, why this happens actually? This is what I want to know.
This is a very interesting question because nowadays we see a lot of complications in relationships and in our day-to-day living. And one of the reasons that I had realized was if you get too upfront or too close to either a person or it could be solving a problem, there is an optimum distance that has to be maintained between even a person or even when you're solving a problem. Very often I had noticed that when I have to solve a problem, if I'm upfront and with my nose sticking to the problem, it cuts off my vision of finding solutions which might be laterally placed. So I had I developed on this thought, and as you had mentioned about the painting, one very interesting, in economics they talk of a law of diminishing utility. So I had used this same term and I called it a law of diminishing beauty. So as you come closer and closer beyond that threshold distance that has to be maintained, the beauty of that object starts diminishing. So it is very, very important that we maintain an optimum distance, and perhaps it could be best illustrated by in the culture that we have been brought up in. They talk of virakti or they talk of detachment. Now this detachment also implies a certain amount of distance that has to be maintained, so as to not get too overcome or to get too involved in any particular person or any object of indulgence, or it could be anything. So you maintain an optimum distance between whom I would call as a subject, and an object. That object could be a person, place, thing, habit, pleasure, anything. But if that critical distance is maintained, it ensures that it does justice to the object by the cognizing ability of the subject, as well as it keeps a certain amount of detachment, which is very, very critical for being able to appreciate something. It talks more about, particularly in today's days and world, when we talk of relationships which form a very important integral part of our lives. So that in any relationship, I think, I remember this one beautiful quote by Bhagwan Rajneesh, where he mentions that let our togetherness be blessed with distance. So that distance is something that perhaps is violated, and which is one of the major problems in the fast deteriorating relationships.
So rather saying that absence make the heart grow fonder, you should say now distance make the heart grow fonder,
Absolutely.
something like that.
Absolutely. That distance is very, very critical.
So I mean, it's like respecting the space also in
Absolutely.
some fashion.
Each one has his own private space, and I think it's if you respect the person, you would respect his space also.
I would like to know something more about the metaphysics of love. I mean, they say that love is a bond that binds a virtue, that connects, giving a sense of purpose, Paradoxically, it's also brings a lot of grief, a lot of pain if the relationship is not, is not up to the mark or is not held properly. So I request you to throw some light on the metaphysics of love.
Very important point that you've raised, sir. And like I being a doctor, I know the biology of love.
Okay.
So the biology of love is largely restricted to perhaps ensuring that the species survives. That is the reproductive aspect of man-woman love as in the common context that we talk of. But when you talk of metaphysics of love, love is this biological love is just a subset of the love that we talk of as the all-encompassing love, or something which is a much larger than being restricted to only biology. So what could be the metaphysics of love? Because it's a very intangible kind of a phenomenon. When I say that I love someone, what is the import of that word when I say that I love someone? Is it that I am attracted to that person, or I am attracted to some object? Is it that I want to possess that object? Is it that I have a great, that presence of that object elates me, it brings out the best in me, it inspires me? So there are so many different shades of love as one were to talk of. So when we talk of metaphysics of love, it is looking at these intangibles of love, which transcend this very cliched and a very, very narrow definition of love, which largely talks of possessing something. So as you had asked the question about, it also brings pain.
Yeah.
So the grief of that which comes out of this emotion of love largely stems out from the fact of wanting to possess something.
Okay.
And if you realize that even when it talks of deteriorating relationships, if you really love someone, like they say that it's a very oft quoted thing, that if you love something, set it free. If it is yours, it will remain or it will come back to you. If it is not, it never was. So if you are trying to make something, or trying to possess something, or trying to own something, or fit it into a particular frame of reference that you feel that which are based on expectations, that expectations is what causes the grief. Because when I am expecting something, and I remember there was this one very beautiful incident narrated to me by one of my friends. He said he was wailing loudly after a breakup with his fiancée, and with a person whom he was dating for a long time. And so this friend of mine asked him that, why you shouting, why you crying? He said, I'm in Hindi they say mera prem bhang ho gaya hai. So he said for a moment, he said, वाकई आपका प्रेम भंग हुआ है? प्रेम कभी भंगता नहीं है, आपकी अपेक्षा भंग हो गई है. So if you understand, so it's your expectations. I've gone for a toss. So what is actually causing the pain is not love. It is the expectations that arise along with the love that causes the pain. So if you can expand your understanding of love, like I love music. Now, what is my expectation? In fact, when I operate, I listen to music because it elevates me, it inspires me, it brings out the best in me. So the expectation is not in a tangible domain that I want this person to do these things for me. But if it is something that makes me grow as an individual, it makes me evolve, anything that which is conducive to my growth, and that positive element is what I would like to call as love. If you restrict it to the domain of possessing something, or controlling something, or dominating something, and making it do something that you want, that want and that expectation is what kills this beautiful, universally, wonderfully prevalent principle of love.
And you will agree that most of the relationships are
they get skewed because of expectations. And you see, the whole idea is that another very sad part of this love is there's in quite a few relationships, particularly in relationships, there comes to be some kind of a dependence, either emotional, financial, social. And if you look at the physics, like I was talking about metaphysics of love, but there's a physics of love also. And what is the physics of love? The physics of love is that if two individuals are leaning on one another, they will converge to a point. A point can never sustain that edifice of a relationship. But if these two individuals keep standing erect, they can then together hold that structure which is love, which binds them together. So the physics of love means that you do not incline towards anyone. You maintain your integrity, your own self-respect, your dignity. And then if the feelings that remain and which are absolutely just sharing some wonderful moments together or not depending on anyone is what the metaphysics of love is.
Here also you intend to say respect the space.
Yes, it is important, absolutely important.
Discover your identity only to lose it. Doctor, a bubble in the ocean has a distinct identity within the realms of water, of course, but that exists only till the thin separating membrane exists. Now, as per your writings in the Speaking Tree Times of India, I remember the membrane of separation you have said is the ego.
Yes.
Why do you say so?
Yeah. This is a very profound question, and it probably is. This whole idea and concept is a culmination of a lot of brainstorming that has happened in my own mind and plus whatever I have come across in my readings. You see, when we in one of the biggest attributes of our philosophy and our Hindu ideology, I would say, I don't look at Hinduism as a religion, I look at it as a philosophy, where they say that when if I try to make sense of this whole universe or what is this universe, we talk of me, the subject, who is trying to understand the objective universe. Now, I have been greatly intrigued by trying to make sense of it all. Like to look at the whole galaxies and this 14 billion years expanding universe, and it's staggering. And I realized that I'd never be able to find an answer to the question as to who made this, who created this, what was the Big Bang. So this whole domain of thought process and this investigation leads you to some point where you say that either I give up, and then you end up being an agnostic person, a person who does not believe, who believes that there is some power, but I don't know what it is. So when I am trying to cognize the universe, I am trying to. Quantum physics has now come out with a very interesting conclusion, rather, that when I am studying an experiment as an observer, that observer is part of that experiment. So I cannot draw conclusions because I am very much a part of that experiment. You understand?
That is what's being observed.
Yeah. So I, as an observer, I am participating in that experiment. So a participant in the experiment cannot conclude because he is part of that experiment. So that when you start investigating on the lines of quantum physics, and when you start, one of the greatest objectives of this whole exercise and endeavor is perhaps the merger of this science and spirituality, because science is barking down by a road which we call as reductionism. They'll keep reducing things to go smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller to come. But that reductionism will get perhaps you to a point where it will tell you some things, but it will still not give you an answer as to why. So now coming back to your question, the ego is the sense of separateness. Yes. That is, I am a distinct entity and the world is different from me. So that is my sense of, so the ego is like they say, man, buddhi, chit, ahankar. These are the four components of the ego. Now, if you to give the analogy of the bubble, I am part of this experiment of the universe that I am observing. Correct. So I cannot conclude anything. So if I am a part of this, there must be something that is a veil between me and the observed universe. And what is that veil? And so when you go through the scriptures, one of the standpoints or one of the primary objectives of spirituality is to find answers to who am I. And also the second important objective is to get rid of the ego or the false identification of the mind, body and the man, buddhi, chit, ahankar. So when perhaps at a stage of revelation or self-realization would be when if this so-called veil of my believing that I am, that sense of me is restricted to my mind, body. But if that veil is torn, then I'll realize that I'm merging with this whole universe, and which is what they talk of Aham Brahmasmi. That means like Rumi had once very beautifully said that I am not a drop in the ocean, I am the ocean in a drop.
Okay.
So that's what it is. So when that would be the point of realization, and when we are, it's very unfortunate that state, when that state does come, there is no experiencer. It is all that remains is just an experience. There is no experiencer. For that experiencer, there has to be a separateness to experience something. But when that experiencer dissolves, there just remains, what remains is just an experience. And that is perhaps why our very rich lineage of saints have tried, and of whom I would give the greatest marks to Sant Dnyaneshwara, who has come closest to probably describing this experience in words, because when he achieved that state of realization, his awareness had heightened to such a point that he could actually describe that. So that experiencer, although it had dissolved and had become the experience, still could recount some points which mere mortals like me can take tips from. So it's very paradoxical that when I say that, when I get to know who I am, because our spirituality is all about koham, and when that stage of soham comes, that I am that, my identity goes, and what remains is just the experience. So I do hope that at some point in time, this, like they say that even quantum physics is now moving from the domain of experiment to experience. It is becoming more experiential rather than experimental. And that, I think, again, like I had mentioned earlier, would indicate the significance of science and spirituality merging.
Also, somebody has said very nicely that ego also means edging God out.
Absolutely.
Somewhere you remove God from,
Yes.
then you can remove it.
Absolutely. So the other aspect of this is, if one can eliminate this sense of doership, which is also something which I'd written an article called The Divine Understanding, which had come in the Times of India Crest edition, which says that we need God only to explain our deficit of our gaps in our understanding. If I don't understand something, I attribute it to God. If I do something and that doesn't happen as to my expectations, then I say that it is karma or destiny or God. But if you, for a moment, get rid of this element or aspect of doership and say that I am not a doer, I am an observer, I think it eliminates a lot of problems.
That brings us to the next point, the invisible safety net. The artists in a circus do death-defying leaps and stunts, but they are aware of the fact that a net is stretched below them for their safety, easing their nerves rather than improving their skills. So in the light of above, don't you think that the safety net is counterproductive?
In my considered opinion, I call that as an invisible safety net, is because I know for a fact that I have my own self-belief and confidence that I am never going to fall into it. Because even if one were to fall, it would be quite a catastrophic event, nonetheless, in spite of the net being there. But you see, what happens is that this invisible safety net is actually a synonym for faith. Even when let's assume that net is there or not, there is, whenever you are doing, when we are talking about death-defying stunts, there is an element of faith. And that faith in something, in some object or whoever it might be, is necessary. Because you see, I am a neurosurgeon, right? And I operate on the brain. And there have been untold instances and episodes where, in spite of having done the best job, there are some events which are beyond my control, which intervene and mar the whole picture and outcome. So, to assume that I am self-sufficient to tackle any kind of a problem in any activity that I choose to do, would actually, it increases the ego. And there's a very thin line that separates being good and being overconfident.
Yes.
And if you don't want to be overconfident, I have always maintained this principle every time I do surgery, that I am doing this step, I hope I'm doing the right thing, and I question I am my own devil's advocate to make sure that I'm not trespassing that fine line between being good and being overconfident. Because the moment you become overconfident, you are extremely vulnerable to taking some wrong decisions and steps which cannot be corrected, because then they are irreversible. So this invisible safety net which I'm talking about is perhaps this reference to this faith, and to believe that I have to be good in what I am doing, no doubt about it. It is not that faith is going to compensate for my competence.
Correct.
My competence is understood, it's a given. But that is not necessarily sufficient to get the outcome that I want. And so what is that lesser than phenomenon that I have to respect? It is that invisible net. It is that belief that I will be doing the right thing, and that ability to genuflect or to kneel down in front of that, and that humility, that modesty is the safety net that one has to always keep in mind. So if that is removed, it might improve the performance, but at the cost of getting overconfident, which is very likely for it to have a very, very catastrophic situation at the outcome. So it is just symbolic of the faith, or symbolic of the humility and the modesty that one has to have.
Nicely put, very nicely put.
Is realization a chemical reaction? Because research have revealed that when a person is subjected to pain, before and after showing him the picture of a deity he had faith in, his tolerance to pain was significantly better. Is it true? If so, why?
Coming to the first part of a question where you talk of is realization a chemical reaction.
Yeah.
I'm a neurosurgeon, and I have been right from my first MBBS days, studied the brain, the physiology, the anatomy, and we talk of neurons, neuronal networks and chemical neurotransmitters. Like most of the diseases, neurological diseases are mediated by neurotransmitters. Like for example, when we talk of Parkinson's, there's a deficiency of dopamine. When we talk of there are excitatory neurotransmitters. So this had got me thinking that even a state of happiness or a state of sadness, like people who go into depression, they're given antidepressant drugs which actually modify the transmitters, chemical transmitters. So that had got me thinking as to, can realization also be mediated by some kind of a chemical reaction in the brain? And that was my thought process. But when you go deeper into this and as you try to unravel this phenomenon of realization, it comes to light that it is something like the unfortunate part is that we talk of when we talk of realization, we talk of it as achieving some state or reaching some point in your it's an objective phenomenon that I'll get to this point and I'm a realized soul. But the answer to this query lies in the term itself, the nomenclature, when they talk of it as a realization. It is not self-knowledge. It is not, it is a realization. And so this realization is something which is largely perception based. It is not a mood. When they talk of, I mean, there have been many accounts given by people that it is a state of bliss. That when you are a realized soul, you attain, there is no suffering or there is no, but it is more than that. It is something much more than that. It is not an episode which is based on the cognizing ability of the brain. It is a perception. It is a realization which comes from within. It is not mediated by any hormones. It's not mediated by any chemicals. To an extent, I have read about these references that there are some psychotropic drugs which probably give a very brief glimpse to what when there's a loss of a spatiotemporal matrix, and which could perhaps give a slight indication of what that state could be, because there is absolutely a thoughtlessness there. It is a state of bliss also. So after going through whatever available literature that there was, it probably is very, very unlikely that realization is something which is chemical based. It is not going to be mediated by any neurotransmitters for sure, and otherwise maybe chemical self-realization would have been, there are so many pharmaceutical companies who are doing so much research, they would have got a self-realization pill. You just take that pill and you've got realization.
Yet it is there, as you said, because
it's
an abstract of,
it is an abstraction, and it is a modified perception. It is you know, like I would say, in other words, coming back to that same example of that bubble, that if I am restricting my awareness to only my mind, body and intellect, but if that veil goes, then there is that realization is being one with the whole universe. I am the universe, and so that is, it is very unlikely to be mediated by any kind of a chemical. The second part of your query was when you were mentioning about the deity which was a person was asked to think about.
Yes.
You know, there is a very pain itself is a very subjective phenomenon. As doctors, we see sometimes we have patients who come with whose tolerance to pain is very, very minimal, and some people, they go through untold suffering but they have a high tolerance to pain. Now what is this subjectivity in pain, perception of pain? So it is perhaps your ability to separate yourself and realize that the body is it has been a documented phenomenon of people having an out-of-body experience also. So the consciousness which animates my body actually migrates outside the body, and that the persons have been gone on record to say that they have seen their body from outside. Yes. So which means that if the pain per se is a subjective phenomenon, there must be some methodology by which you can dissociate and understand that the body is separate from the perceiver. And that is the role where spirituality comes into play. We have seen that we have seen images of rishis walking on the on those fire charcoals, and it just goes to say that pain, as if one were to look at it very objectively, there if you could shift your awareness from that suffering element and maybe focus it on elsewhere and widen your awareness, it could decrease the perception of your pain. And that is the role. So actually the deity is just it's a device, it's a tool to shift the focus, distract. And and that is where, so actually, you know, there is a very interesting concept that there is a new emerging domain called as neurotheology. Neurotheology. Now, as you might know, theology is a study of God and religion, and neuro is of course neurology. So neurotheology is that branch of science which is trying to unravel what is happening in the brain as far as what is when we talk of transcendental phenomena like meditation, or when you think of God, they are talking of an hypothetical God center also in the brain, whether there is some center which mediates that God. So this perhaps we all are very well aware that there are so many religions, there are so many gods, there are so many objects of worship. So what is the underlying commonality to all this? The process of worshipping is common to all. Whom you worship is not important. So the objective is what? That you defocus your attention from the mind body to some other object, and whereby you start in the process your ego starts diminishing, and that is what bhakti is. When the worshipper and the worshipped become one, then there is absolutely that is the height of devotion. So that perhaps could explain why the pain becomes a little more tolerable, or a pain, as we talk of pain threshold, that pain threshold increases significantly if you are thinking of some deity or something, which is just a medium. Because you know, you have to understand one thing. This is one of my premises which I have always been thinking about, that let's assume that there is one there's this huge ego of religions also. Each religion feels that I am the chosen religion. But if that be so, I am sure that the creator would not have been partial to say that only one particular religion is bestowed with the truth. They all are paths leading to the same goal. And I feel very pained to see the kind of destruction and mayhem that religion has created, because if they were to all agree to the fact that our roads are different but we are going to lead to the same place, then it would automatically eliminate all these disturbances and disagreements, you know.
Yeah, so much bloodbath has happened
in the
past also.
It's very unfortunate. Religion. Absolutely.
Okay.
Blissful heights. It is said that it is easier to climb on the top, but difficult to stay there. Now, what is your take on that, considering the fact that you have learned the art of mountaineering, you have been trained into that?
I've always enjoyed the mountains. They fascinate me, and I've done my basic course of mountaineering in Uttarkashi, and I was actually one of the team members for the first civilian Everest expedition in '92. But I had to resign from that expedition because I was doing my residency in neurosurgery. But it has been my uniform experience of climbing the mountain. You know, it's like your entire journey of life gets encapsulated in that 7-day expedition experience. We all begin by seeing that mountain which is looking very intimidating, and it feels that, oh my God, it must be so beautiful. And then you start saying that, okay, I'm going to walk, and you start walking. And then as the first part of the climb starts, you start getting a bit tired, and you say, oh my God. Then another half an hour down that, and you're 1 hour down that, and you're saying, where the hell did I have to come to this? I'm cursing myself, I'm running out of breath, and then I'm feeling very uncomfortable. I don't have water, I have to have limitations in drinking water. But then nonetheless I have to continue. And as I go further, I go to camp 1, and then eventually when I reach that camp 1, Then I take a respite and I look at the mountain again and I say, now that mountain is looking closer. And although I'm stretched a bit, it was it's worth the experience and worth the effort to get to a higher point to see this mountain closer. But more importantly, what you realize is, after you've gained a little bit of height, the awareness of how big the world is. Because when I'm on ground, my vision is restricted to a couple of feet.
Your line of sight.
So a line of sight. But as I gain height, I get to realize the vastness of the terrain, the vastness of the entire landscape, and how insignificant I am in this whole scheme of things. And so this whole experience of being in the mountains is something which is very, very, it's a process of self-discovery. And like I am not very certain about this reference, but it was a quote given by, I think, Sir Edmund Hillary, who climbed Everest. He said that when I reach the top of a mountain and I summit it, I have not conquered the mountain, I have conquered myself and my fears. So if you look at the journey of life, when I climb the mountain, I have my apprehensions, I have my anxieties. And when I reach the summit, I am too insignificant a person to say I have conquered the mountain. But in the process of reaching there, I have conquered my own fears, and that is the beauty of this whole thing. And it is really a very liberating experience when you go on reach on the top, and the kind of the stunning landscapes that you see, and the mountainscapes and the snow-capped mountains. They really make you realize also one more thing, that something so beautiful, it has the little, I have myself experienced that at a point in time, that there is a little bit of fragrance of divinity over there on the top, and that is so beautiful.
No, you are right, because I remember as a child I have observed this, that when we went to Kashmir, the mountains there, the air has a romance in it. It looks like, you can feel. But when you go to Uttarkashi or these mountains here, you feel a different thing. You just want to bow down to the Lord and say that, okay, here I am, and that is there. Okay, on this only, why do people go to mountain?
There's a very interesting question. There was this question was asked to, I think there was this Sir Irwin Mallory, who was one of the mountaineers who was supposedly the first to have climbed Everest, but it was not documented. No, he died in the process. Okay. And they found his ice axe a few meters from the summit. So the people are not sure whether that he died on his way up or on his way down. So, but when he was asked this question, why do you climb mountains? His answer was simply because they are there.
Thank you. I know. I was expecting that.
Okay, the next point of conversation is learning to unlearn. It is a fact that an adult needs a longer time to learn new skills, as he is unable to write off the old ones. Whereas a child seems to learn new skills like a fish takes to water. Why is it so? How can Doctor one learn to unlearn, or vice versa? Tell me.
Yes, that's a very interesting question, because I think that is one of the skills that one has to acquire in case one really wants to transcend one's limitations. Because Dr. Saab, the thing is that if you look at the process of learning that you adopted from your childhood, it is a stepwise learning. You climb on a step 1, then step 2, step 3, step 4. So step 4 is also a function of step 1.
Yes.
It cannot hang independently. So what you realize is that every incremental learning occurs at the cost of what you already know. So my furthering my knowledge is going to expand with the existing biases and limitations of what I started with. Now, if that be so, how will I be able to learn something new if the tools are fixed? I am told that you have got these 26 alphabet, only then you learn this English. I will never be able to understand the language of the bird if I try to use alphabet. But I am told that the only alphabet is the way you can learn. Then that doesn't work. So if I want to, just to give that corollary, if I want to understand the language of the bird, or the sounds of the bird, or the music that the bird creates, there have been instances where some of the rishis in our scriptures have communicated with animals also. Now, there are certain areas in the brain which are called as the silent areas in the brain. Now, just a brief background on this, that there is a Brodmann's classification which talks of different parts of the brain subserving different functions. So when I'm talking to you, as I'm talking to you, when you're understanding what I'm speaking, you're using the Wernicke's area. When you're talking to me, you're using the Broca's area. So these areas have been clearly mapped in the brain. But there are areas in the brain, like for example, in a right-handed man like I am, my right frontal lobe, the function is not known. So if I lop off the entire right frontal lobe, there will be no loss of function. There's right temporal lobe, I'll remove it, there's no loss of function. So these are probably areas of the brain which evolution has given them to man. There is no part of the body which is God has given or made with no design. So we may not still know the function of those brain, of that silent area. We are calling them silent because our faculties as of now, which we have, are unable to evaluate the function of these brain.
But they are not vestigials.
They are not vestigial. They are, in fact, the frontal lobes are the latest upgrade up from the monkeys, if we want to talk of Darwinism, because the monkeys don't have the frontal lobes. We have the frontal lobes. So the right frontal lobe is an upgrade. It is not a vestigial organ. It's a very interesting point to mention, because vestigial, for the benefit of the listener, like probably the tail or the appendix, there are things which are on the way out. But this is an upgrade. So this upgrade has been provided to man. But why it has been provided is not known still. The right frontal lobe. So could it be that when we talk of some transcendental experiences which are there, if I want to keep my mind open to learn something new, I will have to first discard all the tools that have been provided to me, because they have their inherent limitations. And if I try to understand something new using these tools which have their limitations, it would be a futile exercise. It would not serve the purpose. Now, although it's a very interesting question that how does one do it? The only solution to that question is that if I were to keep my mind open and I were to, this is one of the greatest points which I'd like to mention to these atheists, these people who are non-believers in God or whatever. You see, if you were to go on the assumption that in Hindi also, I think in Marathi they say that Baap dakho nahi to shraddha kar. I mean, you show me the evidence or I deny its existence. That kind of a very hardcore attitude and extremist attitude. If you have that attitude, then perhaps you are shutting yourself off to the intangible experiences, intangibles that are there, because I can't prove to you everything. So if I keep my mind open and if I say that perhaps my awareness and my understanding of something has limitations, and if I can expand the scope of my understanding to keep, it's like, taking a leap of faith. I'm taking a leap of faith. I don't know where I'm going to land, but I do believe that there will be something which is going to be beyond the horizons of the scope of my understanding something. And if one were to do that, like I always say, that faith begins where intelligence ends.
Okay.
So faith does not mean that you are unintelligent. When I am talking of saying that I have faith in something, it does not mean that I am a stupid man. I am an intelligent man. But knowing the limitations of my intelligence is what is faith. Because everything can't be documented. If I were to tell you that, Sharma ji, show me the love that your mother has for you, show it to me. It's intangible. So how can you say that then? So if by the logic of these people who say that show me the proof, they would deny the fact that your mother loves you.
Yes.
Because they say there's no proof. So that is what I was trying to allude to when I said that, learning to unlearn. And it is only when we can, erase when I'm talking about learning to unlearn, it is the ability to erase the biases, the limitations, the absolute. There's a lot of bias in whatever, in our educational curriculums also, there's a lot of bias introduced. So it is eliminating the bias, learning to eliminate the bias.
Slates.
Yes, absolutely. And that, I think, is going to be a very important, and that is why this whole thing comes, that when you see a child, when he picks up maybe a mobile, where there are so many features we've never heard of, but he gets a lot at. And whereas I know elderly people, there are people who are technophobic. They say, no, I don't understand this, and they are all highly learned people. It's a paradox. So this is when you are open and you're curious and you want to absorb anything that's new. That learning to unlearn your biases is what I'm talking about.
That's why I'm saying, in a way, they don't want to throw their baggage, what they're carrying, and
just
start carrying a new.
Absolutely.
Something. Okay.
reaching the point of no return, doctor. In life, we have plan B and C for every plan A, as they work as an insurance agent against possible failure of plan A. Or do you think that no other option mindset is a better option? Don't you think so? Please elaborate.
Yes, I do believe that. I'd like to illustrate this with one very interesting story. There was this man, and he was going across a jungle, and he was running out of water, and he had lost his way, and there was this particular fence which he had to jump over, and it had thorns. So this man he went up to the fence. It looked pretty tall. He realized there was no way to step over it or find any foothold, so he had to jump over it. Now, he tried up a couple of times. He took a run up, accelerated, and the moment he came close, he gave up and he said, no, I'm going to hurt myself if I try to jump. This happened 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Finally, the man just casually walked up to that fence. He took out his wallet and he threw it across the fence. That's the end of the story. I don't need to illustrate further.
Correct.
So it is when you are left with no option, your body does have unknown reserves. You see, when we take a decision that I want to do something, we are talking of the limitations and our abilities as we know them, our body to have. But the human body has untold reserves in terms of emotional strength, physical strength, which we are unaware of. So how do you get access to that untapped reserve energies which are there? That can happen only if you stretch yourself. And if the only way you can stretch yourself is by telling yourself that no nonsense. I've just got to do it.
Have any alternative?
No, you do it. You just do it. And you'll be surprised that it's been documented this one instance that there's this mother, and she was carrying her child in a pram, and that pram she parked it and she was sitting and went to pick up something, and she saw a car which was coming down in reverse gear, and towards the pram, and her child was going to come under it. She ran, and that car there was no handbrakes. It was rolling down. It is documented that this lady single-handedly lifted that car from the back where it was coming towards her baby to save the child.
From where she got that energy or strength?
Yeah, we don't know. But there was no option. She didn't have an option. She had to do it, and she did it. So pushing yourself into a situation like that where you have no option, I think is a very good state to be, because you see what happens is you come to plan B only when you have given up on plan A. And so coming to plan B, ideally we talk of saying that okay, it's good to have a plan B, good to have plan C. It's because our ego is there, and we say that okay, I mean, I'll try this, I'll try that. But when you are with a no option mindset, it gives you energy. It taps reserves and energies within you which you never knew existed. And the whole exercise of life, in my opinion, is to become aware and reach this Maslow's summit of that pyramid of Maslow of self-actualization. So to know my full strength, I need to deploy every ounce of my energy to know what my strength is. And this no option mindset is a tool to make me sure that I am using every ounce of energy that I possess.
So this is I think your statement is for those, especially the younger lot, who feel that okay, I need to have some backup for everything.
Yes.
You don't need it. You have enough strength of your own.
And there are so many instances. I remember seeing that this beautiful movie it was a real life story of where the protagonist in that movie, he is absolutely bankrupt, and it was such a beautifully taken. He lost his footwear. He had to take care of his young son, and his struggle, and eventually he went on to become one of the biggest stock market brokers in the United States. The journey, or for that matter, even the journey of our patron Professor Vishwanath is outstanding journey. I look at him as inspiration, because here is a person who is from some very very Mofussil little town in Marameshwar, and he traces his path and he comes. And when I just had visited the dome today, and it's staggering to imagine that. I mean, I'm sure there must have been moments when he must have thought that I don't think it's going to be possible. But yes, that is not something that he subscribes to. I'm going to do it. And I think every person has some element in him. It's just that some people like Professor Ranade have the courage and the fortitude to tap into those reserves when they say that no, I'm going to do it at any cost. And so I think this is testimony to the great place that we are sitting in just now.
Okay, in this point of conversation, doctor, I would like to ask you to let us know the importance of control and restraint. Because as you know, temper is a valuable possession. They say don't lose it. Why do you need breaks and commas in life? Don't you think that hamper the speed of the system? Please elaborate.
This is a very interesting topic. I can again give you the reference and the model or the paradigm of the human brain to explain this. You see, when we were studying medicine, we were taught of there being an upper motor neuron which begins from the brain and ends in the spinal cord, and a lower motor neuron that begins from that point to the nerve which supplies movement of the hand and the legs or whatever. Now, if there is an interruption of the upper motor neuron path, there is uncontrolled activity of my hands or the affected lower motor neuron, which causes spasticity or rigidity. You know, it's absolutely rigid, continuously contracting. So, if you look at evolution as a generic thing, instinct would say that I would like, for example, we have this switch over here, which is there for the button, right? What do you think is the primary function of that switch?
Control, to stop, to keep on, to off.
It is to keep off. Okay. Keeping on to hai.
Okay.
So the switch is meant to switch off the current. Otherwise, it will continuously keep on going. It will be in overstimulation. So this restraint is actually, if you look at it from the evolutionary standpoint, restraint is something which is the attribute of man. You see, animals are totally guided by instinct. They are not ever, they never have a dilemma of dieting, or they don't have the dilemma of not doing something. But man has been given this special attribute of saying that I have to restrain, I have to control. And it's like, you know, when they say that when you're climbing downhill on a ghat, it's always good to go in the second gear. You don't go in the fourth gear. Because that restraint is what saves that vehicle from crashing down. I believe that, and if you look at, I would like to quote one very beautiful episode. When I was in my school, and there was this very famous athlete who had got the same 4 gold medals as Jesse Owens in the 1932 Berlin Olympics, Carl Lewis. So Carl Lewis was an extremely successful athlete, and he won the gold in those same 4 events: 100 meters, 4x100 meters, 200 meters and long jump, which Jesse Owens had won in the Berlin Olympics. And he was his childhood hero, so he said, I'm going to win the same 4 gold medals. And he did win those same 4 gold medals in the Moscow Olympics. After that, he became a celebrity, and they asked him that, what is the reason of your success? He said 2 very beautiful things. One, he said, I could succeed in my life because I had mastered the art of self-denial. Okay. He said, when my colleagues, my friends were out on parties and pub hopping and going for I denied myself that. I controlled my urges to do that. And that mastering the art of self-denial was something that played a big role in my success. That's number one. And the other very interesting thing that he had at that time, the world record for long jump was some 8.32 meters held by Bob Beamon. And it was unbroken for the longest period of time. Carl Lewis was supposed to jump, had to jump for getting the gold medal, he had to cross 8.20 or something, which was way short of the world record. But his objective was to win the 4 golds. So his father used to be training, helping him to train. So what they had done was, he had kept a marker at 8.20, 8 meters and 20 centimeters. When he crosses that, he gets the gold and he can repeat the feat of his hero.
Jesse Owens.
So he did that. And then they asked him, do you have any regrets? Of course, you've told us the reason of your success, but do you have any regrets of anything that you would like to do better? He said, I wish my father had not kept that marker. So, you know, it's like that. So, you knowing where to put restraint, to not control your mind, to not veer into those areas which are temptations and which can tend to deter you from your chosen path is equally important. And also to believe and have self-faith and self-belief that I can do anything and I don't need to have markers in life is also equally important to succeed.
Point number 10 and the last point. Terrorism is a form of cancer. Terrorism is like malignancy. Once few cell escapes and become autonomous, they continue to multiply. Destroying terrorists is like using cytotoxic drugs for cancer, which destroys the normal cells also. So, how do we escape from this collateral damage and control terrorism?
You see, I've been having a very long-term connection and I would say fascination for this very, very intriguing concept of cancer. Now, cancer, if one were to understand, most people would assume that it is some sort of a tumor or some sort of growth of cells. But you see, if you analyze that our whole body as it functions, there is a process of cell differentiation. That means that our body begins as one cell, that is a zygote, and then 2 cells, 4 cells, 8 cells, 16, they keep multiplying. And for a large period of time, for up to let's say 2 to 3 weeks, they have a cell mass which have all the same type of cells. They have just multiplied very fast. But what happens there and what happens in malignancy? In malignancy, the cells multiply rapidly. But when the child is being born, there is a process of differentiation. Differentiation is whereby that program or the intelligence has already, which is there in the DNA, programs that these cells, okay, now they are given the function of becoming the kidney. These cells are now differentiating into the bone. This is going to be the brain. So that inherent intelligence of the body starts passing the allotment of work and saying that these cells will that process is called cell differentiation. So they are common cells to begin with, but then they differentiate and then they end up becoming only one particular type of cell. So the cell differentiation is a very disciplined kind of a self-regulatory process, which is what results in the human being being born. Because if you look at it, that the whole human being of so many cells, so many organs, so many things is starting from one common cell. So it is multiplying, and not just multiplying but is differentiating.
Yes.
Now cancer, the problem is that these cells keep growing uncontrolled. There is no concept of differentiation. They are just multiplying and there is no one to control them. So we are presently using what are called as chemotherapeutic agents. So what chemotherapeutic agents do is that they try to cut the supply required for cell multiplication. So if you cut off the cell, the metabolic requirements for cell multiplication, automatically cells will not multiply. But in the process, cells which are normal body cells which also need to multiply, like our intestine, our hair, those get affected. That's why you see with chemotherapy and people lose hair and yeah. So the objective of writing this article and sharing these thoughts was that I always feel that even for that matter surgery or chemotherapy are actually the failure of medicine. Because when I have to use a knife to cut off something, it means that I have not got to the root of the problem. And you know one very interesting thing, when we were doing, I operate on brain tumors, and we operate on a common type of malignant brain tumors called gliomas. Now gliomas arise from the glial cells, which are the supportive matrix in which the neurons are there. We used to take a bit of that tissue and we used to send it to the National Center for Cell Sciences in the University of Pune. We had a tie-up with them. And they used to actually take those cells and keep them in a nutritional medium and then inject them into a petri dish. Okay. And Sharma Saab, I have seen with my eyes those cells multiply massively outside the body. And then one cell becoming 2 cells is called as one passage. When there are 20 passages, that means the cells multiply 20 times successfully, then they can remain in the form of that controlled low temperatures, and the moment they get the appropriate condition, they'll continue to multiply. So that tumor which killed that man actually is living eternally, permanently. So I had got to thinking that can we have a different viewpoint of looking at cancer? Can it be possible that the cancer is not just cells, it is actually another individual having an ego of its own, and that ego is so powerful that it says that I will kill you but I am going to survive. And this is just brainstorming which is happening. I'm trying to work on this and trying to analyze whether one can, because you know there's so much work in cancer going on right now that I'm sure that the conventional modalities, and the same question about learning to unlearn, So if I can unlearn this thing to believe that cancer is, I've been biased to think that cancer is this. But what if cancer, that is a new human being taking place in taking birth in my own body, which is going to kill me, my own flesh and blood killing me. And what could be the cause of that? Could it be some kind of having a psychosomatic origin, some thought process which is wrong? They have come to some realization that stomach cancers are commonly seen in patients which are preceded having a great degree of anxiety or fear, and that causes them people to have stomach cancers. So if I have to put this thought of learning to unlearn into practice, I do feel that the young minds who might be watching this program, if they can think out of the box and look at this, I would feel that perhaps the answer to cancer would not be chemotherapy or surgery, but it could be something that is far more benign and far more subtle, which will not do damage to the body.
And so how do you relate to the terrorism?
So that is exactly the point. If we tries to use force, and it is like trying to use these kind of chemotherapy agents, we are killing normal people also, which is destroying them. And you see, I have had this experience that when I actually surgically remove a tumor, or I take only a bit of it, the remaining part of tumor which is there, it becomes severely swollen and it can kill the patient. We have seen this happening. So if you just tickle them and try to stimulate them, it is going to breed them even more. So that may not be the best way to tackle terrorism. So I am trying to draw an analogy between the prevailing treatment modalities for cancer as well as the prevailing modalities to deal with terrorism. We ought to go to something more fundamental, try to get to find a solution which is look out of the box.
So I'm not a doctor, but since you talked about this, I remember you're making a program on gamma knife.
Yeah.
How effective it is in such surgeries? Does it also takes away the normal cells, or it's...
No, you see, gamma knife is a very highly specialized form of therapy, where when there's a small tumor which is less than 2 centimeters in the brain, what they do is that they have a very focused penetration of these gamma rays, which penetrate at a specific depth and at a very specific location. It's like when you hold a magnifying glass in the
so you
light
can only
of
read that part.
Only that much part is hit and killed.
So it has its limitations.
Yeah, but anything bigger than 2.5 centimeters you can't use gamma knife.
Okay, Doctor, thank you so much for taking out time for us, and I'm sure this is not the last program that I'm going to do with you.
Oh, yes.
I'll be inviting you for your programs, and also for the benefit of my viewers, all these questions, 10 questions which I have raised to him, is basically they are all available through, I think, your speaking tree.
Yeah, it's called the Inner Universe, compilation.
So it's really interesting, and I thought you like the program. Do write to us and tell us the outcome of the whole thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me, sir.